Welcome back to the channel. I'm Shango, creator from Jamaica. What I'm here to talk about today is the Sony FX3. So the Sony FX3 is Sony's latest camera. Well, they call it a cinema camera, but it's their latest camera. We're gonna look at it and see if it should be classified as a cinema camera. So let's look at these various criteria and see what makes a cinema camera. Most cinema camera that we are familiar with today comes with ND filter. Most cinema camera that we are familiar with today use shutter angle over shutter speed, and the FX3 has none of those. Now the FX3 is the A7S III in a different body, and let me explain that further. If you are familiar with camera, if you are not familiar with camera, Sony released the A7S III about July last year, and the A7S III, an amazing camera. The A7S III, and the reason why, even though I am talking about the Sony FX3, I'll be talking about the A7S III a lot, because again, it is the A7S III just housed in a different body with more video centric features. Let's look at it. So the A7S III, a full frame camera, and as I say, I'm trying to explain as best as possible so a person who doesn't understand anything about video camera get a sense of what the A7S III is and the type of camera it is and the level of camera it is. So the A7S III has amazing autofocus. When I say amazing autofocus, I mean amazing autofocus. You know what I mean? Eye tracking. It is so good that people really consider it a focus camera. Like when you think about the A7S III, you want to use lens that allows you to do autofocus with it. Now the FX3 has that same feature, and as I said, it is the Sony A7 III in a different body. So it has all those amazing features of the Sony A7 III, the 442 internal. It also can record 12-bit and 16-bit externally. So for instance, you have something like any one of the Atomos them that can allow you to record to SSD. You can now record 16-bit. And as I say, all of these bits and all of these things that I'm talking, if you really don't understand how camera work, it will be a little bit difficult for you to understand the capability of this camera. Now the Sony A7S III, amazing battery life, amazing record time. As a matter of fact, it actually can record continuously, which is the first camera that Sony released with that continuous recording, and it really shut off or overheat after an hour. But nobody really shoot for an hour with a DSLR like that or a mirrorless like that. So after using it for a certain period of time, it can shut off based on the environment that it's in. The FX3 now comes with fans, so that would allow it to run for a longer time, and I don't know if that's a big deal when it comes to how a person will be using that camera per se. I don't see a person using their FX3 to shoot a certain type of way. Now let's go back to the Sony A7S III. As I said, it has amazing autofocus. It has very good dynamic range. It has 442 internal. It shoots 4K. It shoots 4K 120 frames per second. So what I mean is that now you have 4K footage that you can really slow down. So the frame rates are 120 frames, 60 frames, 30 frames, 24 frames. Depending on where you are, we are from the Western side, so our frame rates tend to be 30, 60, and 120. If you're from more UK, you would be doing more like 24, etc, etc. 4K at 120 frames is amazing, because what that means is that you can shoot your content and slow it down and still have the latitude in terms of the amount of pixels that you get from the camera. FX3 also has that. Now, what makes the FX3 differ from the A7S3? The FX3, as I said earlier, was made geared towards more videographer who use DSLR camera to capture their content. So the form factor of it is much different. It's much more boxy. It also have about 5 mounting points on the camera itself and 2 under the bottom of the camera. It also has a lot of buttons on it that is more reminiscent with a videographer. For instance, the record button is at a certain place. When you press the record button, it also have tally light, which is a very welcome feature for the camera, because one of the things when you're recording, like I'm doing right now with a Sony camera, you don't necessarily know if the camera is recording. There's no light on the camera saying that it's recording. You just have to hope that it's recording sometime, and if you make that mistake to start recording or start talking or shooting whatever content you're shooting and the camera is not recording, and then after you check it you realize the camera is not recording, that is actually a pain. Like, it's really an issue. So I'm kind of glad that Sony addressed that with the FX3. Now, it also has certain buttons on it, like dedicated ISO button, dedicated zebra button. It has dedicated button for videos. They change up some stuff in it. For instance, like even the placements of certain things. You actually can record on the top of the camera and also on the front of the camera. So it have a lot to do with how you use the camera and where your hand is positioned. So they put record buttons multiple places on the camera. It also have custom functions, but one of the things about the custom functions, which is on the A7S3 it just says C1, C2, C3, but on the FX3 it says 1, 2 and 3 on as ISO. And what that means is that if you are the only person shooting with this camera, there are custom buttons. So if you're the only person shooting with this camera, you can actually change it up. But imagine if you give this camera to a next person. They are looking at that button and they see it say, oh, it's ISO. They might think it represents ISO, but it might represent something else. So I with Sony didn't put any form of labeling, so you could just use the 1, 2 and 3 and put whatever feature you want to put in. You'd have to explain to whoever you're lending your camera what is there, but still, I guess you can do that either way. Now, the top angle, if you notice the difference, I'll be putting the A7R3 on screen and I'll also be putting the FX3 on screen. The form factor is different because of where the camera is geared towards. FX3 comes with a top angle that also works as an audio converter. So it comes with that in the package. You don't actually get the mic for it, but it comes with that, and that allows you to bring in more than one mic, like 2 XLR and also 1 35mm audio into the camera, and it sends through the offshoot digital translation into the camera and records straight on the memory card. That's nice. That's amazing that they give you a top angle. When you put the top angle on the camera, it also helps you to hold the camera and the camera feel much more comfortable in the hand. That's what I've heard a lot of YouTubers who actually got the camera to review saying. However, that top angle is one of the reasons why the camera costs the amount of money that it costs. For me, I wish you possibly could have bought the camera without the top angle, which means the camera price would be more similar to the A7S3. So I think the A7S3 is about $3,500 and this camera is more like about $4,000 US. And it doesn't come with a mic. So you know, if you need to buy a mic for it, that's a next cost right there. So who is this camera geared towards? If you have an A7S3, would you purchase this camera? For me, I don't have an A7S3. I use my A7 III to shoot most of my content, and I am thinking about getting an A7S3. I probably would buy this over the A7S III. And the reason why, as I said, I don't have an A7S III already, and the reason why is because it's more video centric. I have a couple cameras as well which I can use to take photo. This camera is more video centric. I like the form factor. I like that it has all the capabilities of the A7S III, but it is more video centric. So that little tally light on it, that, you know, it give you that confidence that it's recording, is super important to me as a videographer who record content and use camera like mirrorless camera to record. The top handle though, like, I know it's an important part, and I'm sure that companies like Small HD and other companies, Tilta, will be making stuff to, you know, fit this new camera from Sony. However, the 4,000 US dollars, just because you're getting a top angle, I don't know, the price is kind of off. But when I really check it out, I would spend the additional $500 just to get these features. And I mind, you know, as I said, it's not much different from the A7S III. And if you already have an A7S III, I wouldn't recommend you to get this unless you're getting a second body and you want it to do certain type of thing. But for me, who shoots 90% videos, this camera makes more sense in my mind to get a camera similar to this. I'm in the Sony ecosystem. Mind you, I'm in the Blackmagic 6K, but I'm in the Sony ecosystem, and this camera with the capabilities of the A7S III is, to me, an amazing camera. I don't know if it deserves the Cine name, but I can see the thinking of Sony as it relates to trying to get the mirrorless users to be mirrorless users who are shooting more videos, to kind of get into the groove of getting more like an FS6 or a FX9. It has the same, what I call now, the same language. No, well, it has the same look, because the language is more like the A7S III. It has the same look, it has the same feel, it has the gray look. The buttons are positioned in such a way that it gives you that reminiscence of a cinema camera, but it is not really a cinema camera. It's just a mirrorless camera, kind of in a cinema camera look package. It's kind of weird to explain. It's a weird camera to explain, but it's an amazing camera nevertheless. An amazing camera. Once it's like the Sony A7S III, it's an amazing camera. Amazingness, as I always say. And yeah, thanks for watching. I am Shango, a creator from Jamaica. This is ETT. Blessings and guidance.